We're on a search for one of the greatest powers ever known.
That is a wormhole.
Burnham and Book face enemies and uncover a deadly new threat to Discovery.
I could kill you right now.
That's a choice. I hope you'll make a different one.
On the next exciting episode of Star Trek Discovery. Well, friends, here we are again talking Star Trek Discovery Season 5, the fifth and final season up to Episode 5. This one's entitled Mirrors. Now, there will be spoilers ahead. If those aren't for you, take this as your last warning. Let's crack on with the show. So before I get too much into the spoiler territory, the TLDR of this episode is, while I did find a lot of it fun in the revelations and backstories and all that stuff great, I do still feel like it was a mostly fun but missed opportunity with the premise. So what do I mean by that? Mostly the ISS Enterprise coming from the mirror universe or a mirror universe was a good idea in principle, but they didn't fully utilize it to any real extent aside from just using the sets. So putting on my cynical hat for a moment, I'm wondering if the reason they did this, because again, spoilers for the end of the episode, they do rescue this version of the Enterprise into the Prime timeline. I'm wondering if they did that because they have intentions to repurpose this Strange New Worlds Enterprise set into something they can utilize for Academy as a 32nd century refit or retrofit or whatever you want to call it version of the Enterprise. Maybe they'll call it the Enterprise K. Maybe it'll just be a training vessel for these Academy cadets or something. That's my cynical reason for them doing this, in order to get that into the universe so they can reuse it. Outside of that, I just feel like there was a lot of missed opportunity here to, if they couldn't even bring in guest cast to interact with our characters, because maybe that wouldn't make sense for the story, the time period, all that stuff, to at least have some sort of personal logs or something from Mirror Universe versions of, let's say, La'an, Una, Pike even, just some of these characters we haven't seen in the Mirror Universe before who would have been on this version of the Enterprise. Even just get an Anson Mount wearing a goofy goatee for, I don't know, a 10-second captain's log where he's talking about there's an insurrection and he's about to get killed and his ship taken over, something like that. I just feel like something along those lines, or dare I even say it, mirror Spock, so that Michael could have had that poignant moment on the bridge.
That was my brother's station on the USS Enterprise.
Hit home a little bit more. That's most of my negativity for this episode. Like I said, most of the rest of it worked for me as far as the momentum with the overall storyline, and mostly the character revelations and backstory for Locke and Maul. No, La'ak and Maul. And one thing that's really been gnawing at me is...
Were you able to find them?
2 signatures on the bridge, that's us. 3 in sickbay. That's Small, Locke, and Clue.
Never addressed again. So is that vial of goo a life form? I hope we get more answers to that in the next episode. Otherwise, it feels like there was a mystery third person we never got to see. So the other main revelation here we get is the La'ak backstory and who and what he is. Yes, he is a Breen. A lot of the speculation was kind of going towards that direction. I was hoping it was a little bit more grandiose than that, but I do think there's more going on with the Breen than we have unraveled at this point. So we learn that Locke and Maul have this kind of love story thing. She was a smuggler. He was the nephew, I think they said, of some grand person. He's got Yod Thought DNA. He's royalty within the Breen, whatever you want to call it. I'm not entirely certain how Breen culture works, so I don't know if he's like a king or there's something even bigger going on there. But he doesn't really feel like he fits in with the society. There's this whole thing going on where the Breen have 2 faces. The one he's wearing, the more physical version of the face, and then their actual, more fully evolved quasi energy transformative extra dimensional. I'm not entirely certain what it is, but they're higher form of being, and they look down on this because it's kind of, they evolved past that. They don't need this physical form anymore. Why is he taking this face? That actually does work for me. I'm looking at it more as a kind of a halfway between physical and ascended being like in Stargate or something like that. So the Breen have kind of worked their way up from a primitive solid, and they're on the path towards taking a more changeling or energy-based life form, but they're not all the way there yet. That kind of adds a little bit more to the mystery of why they sided with the Dominion way back in DS9. So I actually kind of feel like that fits in very well. They are this more advanced sort of organic life form that is closer towards trying to achieve what the founders are than we are. I'm wondering, and I kind of think this may be where they're leaning towards, that the Breen are actually direct descendants of the progenitors, not in the same way that like all life form in the galaxy was seeded by them. They are actually maybe the direct genetic offspring of the progenitors from maybe a colony planet or something along those lines. It just feels like they're building up a little bit more here, and that's kind of intriguing. I like the fact that they actually gave us this revelation in episode 5, even though it wasn't in the most dun 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 way possible. I like that they didn't make us wait until the very end to give us this revelation, especially since, like I just said, I think there's an even bigger revelation on the horizon.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
So the fact that we've kind of put these pieces together in episode 5, there isn't all that much mystery left to be solved at this point. We know how Maul and Locke came together. We know their motivations and their purpose. We know that they're just intrinsically bonded to each other. We know the grand mystery has been hidden because they didn't think that we were worthy enough back during the Dominion War days, so they hid it. We know what the progenitor technology is. The only real questions we have are what it's going to do and who the heck Kovich is. Those are really the two main things that are kind of dangling over our heads right now, and we're halfway through the season. That leads me to feel like there's going to be a big course change towards the back half of the season where things are really going to ramp up and just kick it into overdrive. So it was mentioned in this episode that the entrance to the portal to this extra dimensional realm was damaged by the burn, and that was a nice kind of connective tissue to the universe Discovery is built. But that also leads me to a question that's been gnawing at me a little bit. All of these quest locations are on a little bit of shaky ground as far as, it's very, very lucky that they still exist or still exist in a usable manner 900 years down the line. Perhaps they didn't think that it was going to be 900 years till we got our act together, but it just feels like, leaving the relic in that den of the animals a couple of episodes ago, who's to say these animals would have still been alive that long in the future? Who's to say that somebody wouldn't have come along and, built a shopping mall over it or something? Who's to say this extra dimensional portal wouldn't have been stumbled upon, destroyed? The ISS Enterprise wouldn't have had a warp core breach and exploded before anyone could get there? It just feels a little bit tenuous, but I'm wondering if there's maybe something else going on behind the scenes that let them know that these things would be a suitable and stable place for the long haul. This leads me to the whole big backstory that went on with the ISS Enterprise. So I guess somebody rose to power and tried to reform the Terran Empire. It didn't go well, and this ship had some sort of insurrection where it was taken over by people who wanted to flee to the Prime Universe.
Terran High Chancellor was killed for trying to make reforms, and this crew escaped. Brought refugees with them who were trying to flee their universe for hours. Kelpian slave turned rebel leader helps them. Action Saru in any universe.
Now, upon first thought, I thought this was tying in a lot of the beta canon where after Mirror Mirror, Spock tried to reform the Terran Empire. Didn't go so well, and that's what led to the downfall, inevitably in DS9, where the Cardassian and Klingons came together and kind of took over. I thought that's where they were going. It occurs to me, and I had this pointed out by somebody else, this was actually a reference to the time travel episode where Georgiou went to the Mirror Universe via the Guardian, and they stated apparently in that episode after she saved Saru's life that this splinter Mirror Universe would exist alongside the Prime Mirror Universe, so that this Mirror ISS Enterprise led by Saru's insurrection is the one that crossed over, not the one that eventually evolved to have Kirk in the Mirror Universe from the original series. So this is an alternate timeline. Not 100% sure if I explained that well, but if that's the case, they're definitely tying it into their own canon more so than the original canon, which, while it does add another interesting layer on top of everything, it also adds a little bit more muddied confusion to just what the heck's going on and how many universes are we following right now. We also learned that most of the refugees from the Mirror Universe made it into the Prime Universe, one of whom was a doctor, a junior doctor on the Enterprise, who joined Starfleet, and by the time of the TNG DS9 era had become an admiral, and she was one of the people in charge of this quest, so that's why she said, you know what, we have this pocket dimension with the ISS Enterprise kind of hidden out of sight, let's put one of the pieces of this progenitor map hidden there because that's a great hiding spot. Thus leading to the question, how many other Mirror Universe people actually did make it to our universe, and of those, how many of them were or are characters that we know? Did Mirror Saru escape? Did Prime Lorca end up joining this and making his way back to the Prime timeline? Even though it looks like my original theory of Locke and Lorca being the same person is incorrect at this point, I did speculate one of the ways Prime Lorca could make it back to our universe was via the ISS Enterprise, so it would be intriguing if he was one of the members of that crew who did make it over. Would have been nice if that was the case where they showed a picture of the manifest or something and Burnham's like, oh my god, I know that man. Something along those lines. Again, maybe we'll get that revelation later on down the line, but that remains to be seen. The other storylines going on here were Raynor taking command of the ship, interacting with the crew. I do like the fact that 2 episodes out of 2, we have Reese kind of coming up with a solution.
If we change out the photon torpedo payloads and replace them with antimatter...
And the other main storyline was Culber dealing with the remnants of being taken over by a Trill or something. Very, very briefly touched upon at the beginning and the end of the episode. I'm not sure if they're really going to flesh that out much because there isn't all that much time left. Maybe this was a storyline they were building up for next season, but hopefully there is a resolution there because I would hate for the show to go out and have Culber still really reeling with all these things going on in his mind. What did you think of this episode? How did you find the Breen revelation? Are you enjoying this? Where do you think we're going from here? Leave all those thoughts down below. Like, share, subscribe, do all those YouTube things. But until next time...
I don't need to know how the cake is boiled, Commander.
Kill her and boil their cakes?
Don't knock it till you try it.